Hey class, today we are going to be talking about soft field takeoff and climb. Now at this point, you should know how to do a normal takeoff and climb, so I'm not going to be going over the basic principles of takeoff. A soft field takeoff may be defined, a soft field is defined as any runway that measurably retards acceleration during the takeoff roll. Which is basically like a soft field, grass or dirt instead of a concrete asphalt runway. It's usually grass or dirt. Now, it also says the objective of a soft field takeoff is to transfer the weight of the airplane from the landing gear to the wings as quickly and smoothly as possible to eliminate the drag caused by surfaces such as tall grass, soft dirt, or snow. Now, soft field takeoff is a little different than other takeoffs because this procedure starts right when you start taxiing. Because usually at these soft fields, the taxi area is also soft. It's also grass or dirt normally. So, if that is true, you hold full back pressure on the yoke. You hold it all the way back while you're taxiing to keep that nose wheel from digging into the ground. Now, you do this all the way to the runway. You don't stop moving. That's one of the most important things. You don't stop. You can go slow, but you don't want to stop because you may just sink in and you may not be able to start taxiing again. So as you're doing this, you got to prepare for takeoff. As you're holding back on the yoke, you got to set 10 degrees of flaps, and you got to get your clearance to taxi, your clearance to take off, and all that. Now, once you get your clearance for takeoff, you slowly taxi onto the runway, still holding full back pressure on the yoke. You're careful not to stop rolling because you don't want to get stuck. And then as you line up with the runway, you smoothly apply full throttle and you still hold back pressure. And then as you accelerate, your nose starts to come up, so you let it off a little bit just to keep that nose off the ground. But you don't want to hit your tail, so you're not holding full back pressure the entire time. As you apply throttle, you gotta let it even out a little bit, so you don't just smack your tail. You want to just hold that nose off the ground. Now, as you're doing that, you're gonna start accelerating and stuff. And now, so you're gonna give it a little release, not smack your tail. And as you do this, you're gonna start to lift off the runway at a little slower speed. So what you're gonna do is, as you lift off, you're gonna level out the aircraft. And you're gonna stay in ground effect and pick up some speed. Now, you're in ground effect, and then you get to 65. You climb at 75 VY. 75, not 65. So once you get to 75, you start your climb. Positive rate of climb above 50 feet. Then you bring up your flaps. And then you stabilize your climb, You get back to 75 knots. Climb at VY. And that is the basics of a soft. Now, I did most of my soft field takeoffs training at Grand Junction Regional Airport. It does not have a soft field. So, training, I wasn't really given the experience on a soft field to start. But once I understood how to do it, my instructor brought me to this smaller airport, Mac Mesa, which was half soft field, half asphalt. So the start of the runway was grass. and then it switched to asphalt. Now, that was my first real soft field takeoff, and it was apparent how different it was to taking off of asphalt. I mean, we accelerated very slow, you know. We hit takeoff speed right as we hit the asphalt, and there was a kind of a bump in the asphalt. So when we hit it, it just launched us into the air, and then we got hit by a gust. And so, like, right as we got launched into the air by that bump, you know, we got hit by a gust, and then it looked like we were turning 10 feet off the ground. So we leveled it out real quick, pushed the nose down so we wouldn't climb anymore. We wanted to stay in ground effect, so we'd accelerate. We accelerated in ground effect, started our climb. Once above 50 feet are all obstacles, we brought up our flaps and stabilized our climb. And that was my first real soft field takeoff experience. And it was definitely, you know, I wouldn't say scarier. It was more, I'm not really sure what the word is. Now, the ACS standards are very similar to the normal takeoff standards. There's only a few differences, and it's about the surface of the runway. So one of them is effects of runway surface. So you got to know how these softer fields affect your performance. So the soft fields, you know, you accelerate slower. Your takeoff distance is going to be longer because you're not accelerating as quick. So, the other thing the ACS talks about is low altitude maneuvering. With this takeoff, you stay in ground effect right above the runway until you pick up speed. Flying next to or right above the runway, it's a little nerve-wracking sometimes, you know, because you got to be careful not to go too low, not to go too high, because unless you've picked up your speed necessary. But if you go too high and leave ground effect before getting your speed, the plane is just going to stall and you're going to fall back to the runway. So you got to be careful to stay in that sweet spot, to stay in ground effect until you pick your speed up, until you are ready to climb.